The rain hammered against the glass walls of Marcus Thorne's corner office as he worked late into the night, but nothing could have prepared him for what he'd discover about the shivering 12-year-old girl he'd find at that bus stop. She wasn't just any homeless child. She was the missing daughter of Silicon Valley's most legendary innovator, a man whose empire had been stolen by Marcus's biggest rival. What started as a simple act of kindness would unravel a conspiracy that reached the highest levels of corporate America, and Marcus would soon realize that protecting this girl meant risking everything he'd built. The question wasn't whether he could save her, but whether she could save him from the web of lies that had consumed his industry for over a decade. Before we carry on, please hit the subscribe button to make my day, and let me know where you are watching from in the comments. The November wind cut through downtown Seattle like a blade, carrying the scent of rain and exhaust as Marcus Thorne stepped out of his black Mercedes. At 38, he'd built Thorne Industries from nothing into a tech empire worth $3 billion. But tonight, success felt hollow as he walked toward the gleaming tower that bore his name. The late meeting with investors had dragged on for hours, their questions about quarterly projections and market expansion blending into a monotonous drone that left him feeling more isolated than ever. As he approached the building's entrance, movement at the nearby bus stop caught his eye. Huddled against the metal bench sat a small figure wrapped in what appeared to be newspaper and cardboard, trembling in the bitter cold. Marcus paused, his hand on the glass door, watching as the figure shifted slightly. The streetlight revealed a young girl, maybe 12 years old, with long dark hair matted against her face and clothes that looked like they hadn't been changed in days. Marcus had walked past countless homeless individuals in his years in the city, usually offering a few bills or directing them to nearby shelters, but something about this child stopped him cold. She was so small, so vulnerable, and the way she clutched that makeshift blanket reminded him of his own daughter, Sarah, who was safe and warm in her bed 20 miles away in his Bellevue mansion. Without thinking, Marcus shrugged off his expensive wool coat and walked toward the bus stop. The girl looked up as he approached, her eyes wide with a mixture of fear and curiosity. Even in the dim light, he could see intelligence there, a sharpness that seemed out of place in someone so young living on the streets. "Hey there," Marcus said softly, crouching down to her level. "You look cold. Would you like this?" He held out his coat, noting how the girl's gaze flickered between his face and the offered garment. "I don't need charity," she said, her voice stronger than he'd expected. There was pride there, dignity that hadn't been broken despite her circumstances. "It's not charity," Marcus replied, setting the coat down beside her. "It's just one person helping another. My name's Marcus. What's yours?" The girl studied him for a long moment before answering. "Natalie," she said quietly, then added, "Natalie Cruz." Marcus felt something stir in his memory at the name Cruz, but he couldn't place it. "Well, Natalie Cruz, that coat's going to sit in my closet all winter anyway. I've got plenty more at home. Besides, you look like you could use it more than I could." Natalie's resistance crumbled slightly as another gust of wind swept through the street. She reached for the coat with trembling fingers, immediately wrapping it around her small frame. The garment was far too large, but it was warm and dry, and Marcus could see the relief in her posture as she settled back against the bench. "Thank you," she whispered, and Marcus heard something in her voice that made his chest tighten. This wasn't just gratitude for the coat. It was the sound of someone who had been invisible for too long, finally being seen. "Are you hungry?" Marcus asked, glancing around at the closed shops and restaurants. "There's a 24-hour diner about 2 blocks from here. I could get you something to eat." Natalie shook her head. "I'll be okay. The coat is enough." Marcus wanted to argue, wanted to scoop this child up and take her somewhere safe, but he could see the weariness returning to her eyes. Trust would take time, and pushing too hard now might drive her away entirely. Instead, he pulled out his wallet and placed $200 in 20s beside her on the bench. "If you change your mind about that food," he said, standing up. "And Natalie, there are shelters in the city, safe places where you could get a warm bed and a hot meal." "I know about the shelters," Natalie replied, pulling the coat tighter around herself. "Sometimes they're not as safe as people think." The weight of her words hit Marcus like a physical blow. What had this child experienced to make the streets seem safer than the places designed to help her? He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out one of his business cards, placing it with the money. "If you ever need anything, anything at all, call that number. Day or night, okay? Promise me you'll call if you're in trouble." Natalie picked up the card, squinting at it in the streetlight. "Marcus Thorne, Chief Executive Officer, Thorne Industries," she read aloud. Her eyes widened slightly. "You're the Marcus Thorne? The tech guy?" "That's me," Marcus said, surprised by her recognition. "You follow the tech industry?" A shadow passed over Natalie's face. "My dad used to work in tech," she said quietly. "Before he died." Marcus felt his heart clench. "I'm sorry for your loss, Natalie. How long ago did he pass?" 2 years, she replied, then seemed to realize she'd revealed more than she intended. "I should go. Thank you for the coat." "Wait," Marcus said, as she started to gather her few possessions. "Where will you go? It's supposed to get down to freezing tonight." "I have places," Natalie said, but Marcus could hear the uncertainty in her voice. She stood up, the coat hanging almost to her ankles, and gave him a small nod before disappearing into the shadows between buildings. Marcus stood at the empty bus stop for several minutes, staring at the spot where she'd been sitting. The encounter had shaken something loose in him, a feeling he couldn't quite identify. As he finally made his way back to his building, he found himself wondering about Natalie Cruz and what circumstances had led a 12-year-old girl to choose the streets over whatever alternatives were available to her. The next morning, Marcus couldn't concentrate on the board meeting that would normally have his full attention. The quarterly reports and strategic planning sessions felt trivial compared to the image of Natalie shivering at that bus stop. He found himself staring out the conference room windows, scanning the streets below for any sign of a small figure in an oversized wool coat. "Marcus?" The voice of his CFO, Robert Chen, cut through his distraction. "We need your input on the Parker acquisition." Marcus turned back to the table, forcing himself to focus on the presentation. The Parker Technologies deal was worth $200 million and would significantly expand Thorne Industries' reach into artificial intelligence development. It should have been exciting, but all Marcus could think about was whether Natalie had found somewhere warm to sleep. "The financials look solid," Marcus said, scanning the documents. "What's our timeline on closing?" 6 weeks if everything goes smoothly, Robert replied, though there might be some complications with the regulatory approval. Parker's technology intersects with some sensitive areas of AI development. Marcus nodded, making notes as the meeting continued, but his mind kept drifting. When the session finally ended 2 hours later, he found himself alone in his office, staring at his phone. Should he call the local shelters to see if Natalie had shown up? Was there a way to find her without seeming like a stalker? The answer came sooner than he expected. 3 days after their encounter, Marcus was eating lunch at his desk when his assistant knocked on the door. "Mr. Thorne? You might want to see this." Janet held up her tablet, displaying a news website. "There's a story trending about a missing child case that's been reopened." Marcus took the tablet, and his blood ran cold. Staring back at him from the screen was Natalie, but this wasn't a recent photo. This image showed a younger version of the girl he'd met, maybe 10 years old, with bright eyes and a genuine smile. She was standing next to a man Marcus recognized immediately, though it took him a moment to place where he knew the face from. The headline read, "Tech Legend's Daughter Still Missing After 2 Years. Police Reopen Investigation into Disappearance of Natalie Cruz." Marcus's hands trembled slightly as he read the article. Natalie Cruz, daughter of innovative software engineer Diego Cruz, had disappeared from her foster home 2 years ago, shortly after her father's death. Diego Cruz, the article explained, had been a brilliant programmer who developed groundbreaking algorithms for data processing and artificial intelligence. His work had been valued at over $800 million when he died suddenly of a heart attack at age 34. But here's where the story became more complicated, and Marcus felt his stomach drop as he continued reading. After Diego's death, his company and all his intellectual property had been acquired by Blackstone Dynamics, a rival tech firm run by Marcus's biggest competitor, Victor Blackstone. The acquisition had been controversial, with Diego's family claiming the contracts were signed under suspicious circumstances and that Diego had been planning to leave Blackstone Dynamics before his death. Marcus set down the tablet, his mind racing. Natalie wasn't just any homeless child. She was the daughter of one of the most innovative minds in Silicon Valley, and her father's work had somehow ended up in the hands of Victor Blackstone. The same Victor Blackstone who had been trying to undermine Thorne Industries for the past 5 years, stealing clients and poaching employees at every opportunity. The more Marcus thought about it, the more pieces began falling into place. Diego Cruz had been a legend in the programming community, known for developing algorithms that could process vast amounts of data in ways that seemed almost magical. His death had been sudden and unexpected, and within weeks, all of his work had been transferred to Blackstone Dynamics. If there had been irregularities in that transfer, if Diego had been planning to take his innovations elsewhere, that would represent a massive financial loss for Blackstone. And now Diego's daughter was living on the streets, apparently having run away from foster care rather than accepting the system designed to help her. Marcus wondered what Natalie knew about her father's work, about the circumstances surrounding his death, and about the acquisition of his company. That evening, Marcus found himself driving through downtown Seattle, looking for any sign of Natalie. He checked the bus stop where they'd first met, then expanded his search to nearby areas where a homeless child might seek shelter. After 2 hours of fruitless searching, he was about to give up when he spotted a familiar figure sitting on the steps of a closed library. Natalie was still wearing his coat, but she looked even smaller and more fragile than she had 3 nights ago. Marcus parked his car and approached slowly, not wanting to startle her. "Natalie?" he called softly when he was still several feet away. She looked up, recognition flickering in her eyes. "Marcus, what are you doing here?" "Looking for you," he said honestly. "I saw the news story today, about your father and about you being missing." Natalie's entire demeanor changed. The openness that had been growing between them vanished, replaced by the wariness of a cornered animal. "I don't know what you're talking about," she said, starting to gather her things. "Diego Cruz was your father," Marcus said gently. "He was an incredible programmer, and he developed technology that's now being used by Blackstone Dynamics. You've been missing for 2 years, and people are looking for you." "People are looking for me because I'm worth money to them," Natalie shot back, her voice bitter. "My father's work is worth hundreds of millions of dollars, and as long as I'm missing, Victor Blackstone gets to keep using it without paying anyone." Marcus felt the pieces clicking into place. "You know about your father's business dealings?" "I know my father was planning to leave Blackstone before he died," Natalie said, her voice shaking with anger. "I know he had offers from other companies, including yours. I know Victor Blackstone had him followed and threatened, and I know my father was scared in the weeks before he died." The revelation hit Marcus like a physical blow. "Natalie, are you saying you think your father's death wasn't natural?" "I'm not saying anything," Natalie replied, but her eyes told a different story. "I'm just saying that funny things happen when people try to leave Victor Blackstone. And funny things happen to people who ask too many questions about Diego Cruz." Marcus crouched down to her level, keeping his voice low and calm. "Natalie, if you know something about your father's death, about what happened with his company, you need to tell someone. There are people who can help you, who can protect you." "Like who?" Natalie laughed bitterly. The police? They closed the investigation into my father's death after 2 weeks. Social services? They placed me with a foster family that was getting paid by Blackstone to keep me quiet and out of sight. The only reason I'm safe now is because nobody knows where I am. The weight of what Natalie was telling him settled over Marcus like a shroud. If she was right, if Victor Blackstone had somehow orchestrated Diego Cruz's death and then manipulated the system to gain control of his work, it represented corruption on a scale that Marcus had never imagined. And it meant that Natalie was in genuine danger, not just from the streets, but from people with unlimited resources and no scruples about how they used them. "What if I told you there was another way?" Marcus said carefully. "What if I told you that I could offer you protection, a safe place to stay, and help in getting justice for your father?" Natalie studied his face intently. "Why would you do that? You don't even know me." "Because what happened to your father was wrong," Marcus replied. "Because no child should have to live on the streets. And because if Victor Blackstone really did what you think he did, then he needs to face consequences for it." "You hate Victor Blackstone," Natalie observed. "This isn't just about helping me, is it?" Marcus considered lying, but something in Natalie's eyes told him she would see through any deception. "You're right. Victor Blackstone has been trying to destroy my company for years. He steals clients, poaches employees, and uses every dirty trick in the book to gain market advantage. If he murdered your father to steal his work, then yes, I want him to pay for it. But that doesn't change the fact that you need help, and I'm in a position to bond. Provide it." Natalie was quiet for a long moment, weighing his words. Finally, she spoke. "If I came with you, what would happen to me? Would you turn me over to social services?" "Not if you don't want me to," Marcus said. "I have a daughter about your age. I have a big house with plenty of space. You could stay with us while we figure out how to prove what really happened to your father. And if we can't prove it, if Victor Blackstone is too powerful and too well connected, then we'll cross that bridge when we come to it," Marcus said. "But Natalie, staying on the streets isn't a long-term solution. Winter's coming, and it's going to get colder. You're smart and you're strong, but you're also 12 years old. You shouldn't have to survive on your own." Natalie looked down at the coat wrapped around her, then back up at Marcus. "Your daughter, does she know you're out here trying to rescue homeless kids?" "Sarah doesn't know about you yet," Marcus admitted. "But she would want to help if she did. She's got a good heart, like her mother did." Something in his voice made Natalie look at him more closely. "Her mother died?" "Cancer, 3 years ago," Marcus said quietly. "Sarah and I have been figuring out how to be a family without her." "I'm sorry," Natalie said, and Marcus could hear genuine sympathy in her voice. "Thank you. The point is, we understand loss. We understand what it's like when the world suddenly becomes a scary, uncertain place. Maybe we can help each other figure out how to move forward." Natalie stood up slowly, clutching her few possessions. "If I come with you, and if this turns out to be some kind of trap, I'll run, and you'll never find me again." "Fair enough," Marcus said, standing as well. "But Natalie, I give you my word that I will never betray your trust. Everything I've told you tonight is the truth." The drive to Marcus's house in Bellevue took 30 minutes, during which Natalie sat silently in the passenger seat, staring out the window at the city lights. Marcus found himself stealing glances at her, struck by how composed she seemed despite everything she'd been through. There was a maturity to her that spoke of experiences far beyond her years. "Tell me about your daughter," Natalie said as they crossed the bridge out of downtown. "Sarah's 13, just a year older than you," Marcus said, grateful for the neutral topic. "She's in 8th grade, plays soccer, and has strong opinions about everything. She's been asking me to get involved in more community service projects, actually. She says I work too much and don't do enough to help people." "Smart kid," Natalie observed. "Yeah, she is. Takes after her mother in that regard." Sarah's going to have a lot of questions when I bring you home, but she's also going to want to make sure you're okay. I should probably warn you that she might try to mother you a bit. She's been the only kid in the house for a while now. I'm not used to people wanting to take care of me, Natalie said quietly. You might find you like it, Marcus replied. Having people who care about you isn't a weakness, Natalie. It's what makes life worth living. The Thorne house was a sprawling contemporary structure set on 5 acres of manicured grounds. As they pulled into the circular driveway, Marcus saw Sarah's face appear in one of the upstairs windows. By the time he and Natalie reached the front door, Sarah was waiting in the foyer, her long blonde hair pulled back in a ponytail, and her expression curious, welcoming. "Dad?" Sarah said, looking between Marcus and Natalie. "Who's your friend?" "Sarah, this is Natalie," Marcus said. "She's going to be staying with us for a while." "Natalie, this is my daughter Sarah." Sarah stepped forward with the easy confidence of a teenager who had been raised to be comfortable around adults. "Hi, Natalie. Are you okay? You look like you've been through something." The directness of the question seemed to catch Natalie off guard. I'm fine," she stammered. "Dad's coat looks huge on you," Sarah observed with a smile. "Come on, let's get you something that actually fits." "I bet we're close to the same size." Before Natalie could protest, Sarah had taken her by the hand and was leading her up the stairs toward the bedrooms. Marcus followed, watching in amazement as his daughter effortlessly began the process of making Natalie feel welcome. "This is the guest room," Sarah said, pushing open a door to reveal a spacious bedroom with its own bathroom. "But if you don't like it, there are 3 other bedrooms you could choose from." "Dad's got way too much space in this house." "It's beautiful," Natalie said softly, staring around the room as if she couldn't quite believe she was there. "The bathroom has a big tub if you want to soak for a while," Sarah continued. "I'll find you some clothes that fit better than Dad's coat. Are you hungry? Our housekeeper left dinner in the fridge, but I could make you something fresh if you prefer." Marcus watched from the doorway as Natalie slowly sat down on the edge of the bed, her composure finally beginning to crack. "I don't know what to say," she whispered. Sarah sat down beside her. "You don't have to say anything. Just rest and let us take care of you for a while. Dad's really good at taking care of people, even if he doesn't always show it." "Sarah," Marcus said gently, "why don't you give Natalie some time to get settled? She's had a long day." "Of course," Sarah said, jumping up. "Natalie, I'll leave some clothes outside your door, and there are towels in the bathroom closet. If you need anything at all, just call for me or Dad, okay?" After Sarah left, Marcus lingered in the doorway. "Are you okay?" he asked. Natalie nodded, though he could see tears in her eyes. "Your daughter is very kind." "She gets that from her mother," Marcus said. "Natalie, I want you to know that you're safe here. Whatever happens next, whatever we discover about your father's death, you have a place here for as long as you need it." "Thank you," Natalie whispered. "I haven't felt safe in a very long time." Marcus closed the door softly and found Sarah waiting for him in the hallway, her arms full of clothes. "Dad, what's really going on?" Sarah asked. "That girl has been through something terrible, hasn't she?" Marcus considered how much to tell his daughter. Sarah was mature for her age, but she was still a child, and the situation with Natalie was potentially dangerous. "She lost her father a couple of years ago," Marcus said finally. "She's been having a hard time since then, and she needed somewhere safe to stay." "There's more to it than that," Sarah said, studying her father's face. "I can tell when you're worried about something, Dad. Is she in some kind of trouble?" "Maybe," Marcus admitted. "But we're going to figure it out together, okay? In the meantime, I need you to be patient with her. She's been on her own for a while, and it might take time for her to trust us." Sarah nodded solemnly. "I'll take care of her, Dad." Just like Mom would have. The next morning, Marcus woke early and made his way to the kitchen, where he found Natalie sitting at the breakfast bar. dressed in Sarah's clothes and looking more like a normal 12-year-old than she had since he'd met her. She had showered and washed her hair, and the haunted look in her eyes had softened slightly. "Good morning," Marcus said, moving to the coffee maker. "How did you sleep?" "Better than I have in months," Natalie replied honestly. "The bed is incredibly comfortable." "Sarah's already left for school, but she made you breakfast before she went," Marcus said, pointing to a plate covered with a kitchen towel, "pancakes and bacon." She was very specific about the bacon being crispy. Natalie uncovered the plate and smiled, the first genuine smile Marcus had seen from her. She didn't have to do that. She wanted to. "Sarah's been asking me for a long time when we were going to have other people in the house again. She says it's too quiet with just the two of us." Natalie began eating, and Marcus could see some of the tension leaving her shoulders as she settled into the normalcy of the moment. After a few minutes, she looked up at him. "What happens now?" she asked. Marcus poured himself coffee and sat down across from her. "Now we start figuring out what really happened to your father. I've been thinking about what you told me last night, about Victor Blackstone and the circumstances around your father's death. If we're going to prove anything, we need evidence." "What kind of evidence?" "Documents, emails, witness statements, anything that shows your father was planning to leave Blackstone or that he was being threatened. Do you know if your father kept any records at home? Maybe files or correspondence that weren't on his work computer?" Natalie was quiet for a moment, chewing thoughtfully. "There might be something," she said finally. "Before he died, my father gave me a flash drive. He said it was important and that I should keep it safe, but I never looked at what was on it." Marcus felt his pulse quicken. "Do you still have it?" "I hid it in a place I knew no one would think to look," Natalie said. "But getting it back might be dangerous. It's in the house where I used to live with my foster family." "The family that was being paid by Blackstone?" Natalie nodded. "The Hendersons. They weren't bad people, just scared. Mr. Henderson worked for a company that did business with Blackstone, and he was told that if he kept me quiet and out of sight, his job would be secure. When I ran away, I'm sure they reported it to Blackstone immediately." Marcus stood up and began pacing, his mind working through the implications. If your father gave you a flash drive with important information, and if Blackstone knows about it, then they're probably still looking for you. They can't risk having that information become public. "Which is why I've been hiding," Natalie said. "As long as I'm missing, as long as no one knows where I am, I'm relatively safe. But if Blackstone finds out you're helping me, then they'll come after both of us," Marcus finished. "Natalie, I need you to understand something. If we're going to do this, if we're going to try to get justice for your father, there are going to be risks. Blackstone has a lot of money and a lot of influence. They'll fight back, and they'll fight dirty. Are you saying you don't want to help me anymore?" Natalie asked, and Marcus could hear the fear in her voice. "No," Marcus said firmly. "I'm saying I want you to understand what we're getting into. But I also want you to know that I'm not afraid of Victor Blackstone. I've been competing with him for years, and I know how he operates. If he murdered your father, then he's going to pay for it, no matter what it costs me." Natalie studied his face for a long moment. "Why do you hate him so much?" Marcus sat back down, considering how to answer. 5 years ago, Victor Blackstone tried to buy my company. When I refused to sell, he launched a campaign to destroy me. He poached my best employees, undercut my contracts, and spread rumors about my business practices. He cost me millions of dollars and nearly drove me into bankruptcy. But you survived. I survived, and I rebuilt stronger than before. But in the process, I learned that Victor Blackstone is a man who believes he can take whatever he wants, whenever he wants it. He sees people as obstacles to be removed or assets to be acquired. If he killed your father for his technology, it would be completely consistent with everything I know about him. Natalie pushed her plate away, her appetite apparently gone. "So what do we do?" "First we get that flash drive," Marcus said, "but we do it carefully, and we do it smart. Do you remember the layout of the Henderson house? Could you get in and out without being seen?" "Maybe," Natalie said slowly. "But if they're watching the house, if they know I might come back—" "Then we make sure they're not watching," Marcus said. "I'll have the house surveilled first, and if it's clear, we'll go in together." "But Natalie, I need to know exactly where you hid that flash drive." "It's in the basement," Natalie said. "There's a loose floorboard under the stairs where I used to hide things. The drive is wrapped in plastic and taped to the underside of the board." Marcus nodded, already formulating a plan. "Okay, here's what we're going to do. I'm going to hire a private security firm to watch the Henderson house for a few days. Make sure there's no unusual activity. If it's clear, we'll go in at night when the family is asleep. You'll get the drive, and we'll be out in less than 10 minutes. And then what?" "Then we find out what your father wanted you to know," Marcus said, "and we use that information to bring down Victor Blackstone." That afternoon, while Natalie rested and Sarah was at school, Marcus made a series of phone calls from his home office. The first was to David Kim, a former FBI agent who now ran a private investigation firm that Marcus had used before for corporate security matters. "David, I need a surveillance job," Marcus said when Kim answered. "Completely off the books, and I need it done yesterday." "What kind of surveillance?" Kim asked. "I need you to watch a house in Redmond for the next few days. See who comes and goes, whether there's any unusual activity. Basically tell me if the place is being monitored by anyone else." "Corporate espionage?" "Something like that," Marcus said. "How quickly can you have people in place?" "Give me the address and I can have eyes on the location within 2 hours, Kim replied. "What am I looking for?" "Specifically?" "Duh." Marcus gave him the Hendersons' address and described the kind of surveillance he was concerned about. "Professional watchers," he said. "People who might be interested in a runaway foster child returning to her former home." "Interesting," Kim said. "How long do you need the surveillance?" 3 days should be enough. And David, discretion is absolutely critical on this one. If anyone asks, you've never heard of me. Understood. I'll call you with updates. Marcus's next call was to his lawyer, Patricia Valdez, a woman who specialized in corporate law, but who also had extensive experience with criminal matters. "Patricia, I need some advice," Marcus said. "Hypothetically, if someone had evidence of corporate misconduct that might also involve criminal activity, what would be the best way to bring that evidence to light?" "That's a pretty broad question, Marcus," Patricia replied. "What kind of misconduct are we talking about?" "Theft of intellectual property, possibly murder, definitely corruption of the foster care system." There was a long pause. "Marcus, please tell me you're not about to do something that's going to get you arrested." "I'm trying to help someone who can't help herself," Marcus said. "But I need to know the right way to do it." "If you have evidence of criminal activity, the right way is to turn it over to law enforcement and let them handle it," Patricia said firmly. "Do not try to investigate this yourself. Do not try to confront anyone. Do not do anything that could be construed as obstruction of justice or tampering with evidence. And if law enforcement can't or won't act on the evidence, then you find a way to make them act. You go to the media, you go to the Attorney General's office, you go to the FBI. But Marcus, if this is as serious as you're making it sound, you need professional help. This isn't a corporate takeover battle, this is potentially murder we're talking about." Marcus thanked Patricia and hung up, knowing that her advice was sound, but also knowing that he couldn't simply turn Natalie over to law enforcement without knowing what was on that flash drive. If Diego Cruz had documented evidence of Blackstone's threats or illegal activities, that information could be the key to protecting Natalie and bringing Blackstone to justice. But if the drive contained something else, something that could be misinterpreted or used against Natalie. Turning it over to the police could put her in even more danger. That evening, as the three of them sat around the dinner table, Marcus watched Sarah and Natalie begin to bond over shared interests in books and movies. Sarah was naturally curious about Natalie's life, but she was also sensitive enough not to push too hard when Natalie seemed uncomfortable with a particular topic. "So you've been homeschooled?" Sarah asked as they cleared the dishes. "Sort of," Natalie replied. "I've been teaching myself mostly. I have a library card, and I spend a lot of time reading." "What's your favorite subject?" "Computer science," Natalie said, and Marcus looked up with interest. "My dad taught me some programming before he died. I've been trying to keep learning on my own." "That's so cool," Sarah said. "Dad's always trying to get me interested in programming, but I'm more of a literature person. Maybe you could teach me some of the basics?" "I'd like that," Natalie said, and Marcus could see genuine happiness in her eyes for the first time since he'd known her. Later that night, after Sarah had gone to bed, Marcus and Natalie sat in the living room discussing their plans for retrieving the flash drive. "David Kim called this afternoon," Marcus said. "His people have been watching the Henderson house since 2 o'clock, and so far there's no sign of any unusual surveillance. The family follows a pretty regular routine. They're usually asleep by 10:30. "What about neighbors?" Natalie asked. "Mrs. Peterson next door used to watch everyone who came and went on the street. Kim's people will be watching for that too. If there's any sign of trouble, any indication that someone else is watching the house, we'll abort and try again another night." Natalie nodded, but Marcus could see the tension in her shoulders. "Are you scared?" he asked. "Terrified," Natalie admitted, but also relieved. "I've been carrying the secret of that flash drive for 2 years, wondering what my father wanted me to know. Maybe it's time to find out. Whatever's on that drive, we'll deal with it together," Marcus said. "You're not alone anymore, Natalie." "I keep thinking I'm going to wake up and discover this has all been a dream," Natalie said softly. "That I'm still at that bus stop, still cold and scared and alone." "This is real," Marcus assured her. "You're safe here, and you're going to stay safe. I promise you that." The next evening, David Kim called with an update. "The house is clean," he reported. "No signs of external surveillance, and the family's routine hasn't changed. If you're going to do this, tonight would be optimal." They were in bed by 10:15 last night and the night before. Marcus felt his pulse quicken. What about the neighborhood? Any unusual activity? Nothing. A few dog walkers, some teenagers hanging out at the park down the street, but no one paying attention to the Henderson house. "My recommendation is that you go in around midnight. The family should be in deep sleep by then, and the neighborhood is quiet." Marcus looked at Natalie, who was sitting on the couch with her hands clasped tightly in her lap. "Are you ready for this?" "As ready as I'll ever be," she replied, though her voice trembled slightly. They left the house at 11:45, driving through the quiet suburban streets of Redmond in Marcus's Mercedes. The Henderson house was a modest, 2-story colonial in a middle-class neighborhood. Surrounded by similar homes with well-maintained lawns and minivans in the driveways. Marcus parked 2 blocks away, and they walked the rest of the distance, staying in the shadows cast by the streetlights. "The basement entrance is around back," Natalie whispered as they approached the house. "There's a door that leads directly downstairs. Mr. Henderson always forgot to check the lock on it." They made their way around to the back of the house, where a small patio led to a glass sliding door, and, beside it, a wooden door that was clearly older than the rest of the house. Natalie tried the handle, and it turned easily. "Still unlocked," she breathed, and Marcus felt a mixture of relief and apprehension. The basement was dark and musty, filled with the accumulated belongings of a family that had lived in the house for many years. Christmas decorations, old furniture, and boxes of clothes created a maze that Natalie navigated with the confidence of someone who had spent significant time in the space. "Over here," she whispered, leading Marcus to a wooden staircase that led up to the main floor. She knelt down beside the third step from the bottom and ran her fingers along the floorboard until she found what she was looking for. "Help me," she said, and together they pried up the loose board. Natalie reached into the gap and pulled out a small plastic bag, which she opened to reveal a black flash drive no bigger than Marcus's thumb. "This is it," she said, holding it up in the dim light filtering through the basement windows. "This is what my father wanted me to keep safe." They replaced the floorboard and made their way back to the basement door, but as they stepped outside, Marcus heard something that made his blood freeze. Car doors slamming, followed by footsteps on the front sidewalk. "Someone's here," he whispered, grabbing Natalie's hand and pulling her toward the fence that separated the Hendersons' backyard from their neighbor's property. They had just reached the fence when the basement door they had come through suddenly opened and a flashlight beam swept across the yard. Marcus pushed Natalie behind a large oak tree and pressed himself against the trunk, his heart pounding as he heard voices. "They were definitely here," a man's voice said. "The door's still warm from being opened." "Check the basement," another voice replied. "If she came back for something, it's probably down there." Marcus recognized the second voice, and his blood ran cold. Victor Blackstone himself was standing in the Hendersons' backyard, directing what appeared to be a search for Natalie and whatever she had come to retrieve. "Mr. Blackstone," the first voice said, "what if they're still in the area? What if they saw us coming?" "Then we find them," Blackstone replied, his voice carrying the cold authority of someone accustomed to getting what he wanted. "The girl has something that belongs to me, and I intend to get it back." Marcus felt Natalie trembling beside him as they listened to Blackstone's men searching the basement. After what felt like hours but was probably only minutes, the men emerged from the house. "Nothing obvious," one of them reported. "But there's a loose floorboard under the stairs. Looks like something might have been hidden there." "So she was here," Blackstone said, satisfaction evident in his voice. "Which means she's still in the area. Start checking the neighborhood. Look for any cars that don't belong, any signs of surveillance, and put someone on Marcus Thorne." Marcus felt his stomach drop. Somehow, Blackstone had connected him to Natalie's disappearance. Whether through the investigation into her missing persons case or through some other means, Blackstone knew that Marcus was involved. "What about the Hendersons?" the first voice asked. "They don't know anything useful," Blackstone replied. "The girl ran away from them 2 years ago, and they've been too scared to ask questions since then. But keep an eye on them anyway. If she tries to contact them, I want to know about it." The men spent another 10 minutes searching the yard and the surrounding area before finally getting back into their cars and driving away. Marcus and Natalie remained hidden behind the tree for an additional 15 minutes, making sure they were really gone. "How did they know we were coming?" Natalie whispered as they made their way back to Marcus's car. "I don't know," Marcus replied, but his mind was already working through the possibilities. Had Kim's surveillance been detected? Had someone seen them entering the neighborhood? Or was there another explanation, something more troubling? They drove home in tense silence, both of them processing what they had just experienced. The casual way Blackstone had spoken about Natalie, the assumption that she had something that belonged to him, suggested that this was far from over. Whatever was on that flash drive, it was important enough for Blackstone to personally oversee its recovery. Back at the house, they settled in Marcus's home office, where he inserted the flash drive into his computer. The drive was password protected, which didn't surprise Marcus, but it did present an immediate obstacle. "Do you have any idea what your father might have used as a password?" Marcus asked. Natalie thought for a moment. "Try my mother's maiden name, Castellanos." Marcus typed it in, but the system rejected it. They tried Natalie's birthday, Diego's birthday, various combinations of family names and important dates, but nothing worked. "Wait," Natalie said suddenly. "Try Esperanza." That was my mother's name, and it was also the name of the first program my father ever wrote. Marcus typed in Esperanza, and the drive unlocked. What they found on the drive was more explosive than either of them had expected. Diego Cruz had meticulously documented months of threats, intimidation, and illegal activities by Victor Blackstone and his associates. There were recorded phone conversations in which Blackstone threatened to destroy Diego's reputation if he left the company. There were emails detailing plans to steal Diego's intellectual property and claim it as Blackstone's own work. And most damning of all, there was a series of documents that suggested Blackstone had hired people to follow Diego and gather information about his personal life that could be used against him. But the most shocking discovery was a video file dated just 3 days before Diego's death. In it, Diego appeared tired and frightened as he spoke directly to the camera. "If you're watching this, it means something has happened to me," Diego said in the video. "Victor Blackstone has been threatening me for weeks, telling me that if I try to leave his company, he'll make sure I never work in the tech industry again. But it's gotten worse than that. Yesterday, someone broke into my house while Natalie was at school. Nothing was stolen, but they left a message on my computer. A photo of Natalie walking home from school with a note that said, 'Accidents happen to people who don't listen.'" Marcus felt rage building in his chest as he watched Diego's obvious terror for his daughter's safety. "I've decided to give Blackstone what he wants," Diego continued in the video. "I'll sign over my patents and my algorithms to avoid putting Natalie in danger. But I'm also creating this record in case something happens to me anyway. All of my work, everything I've created, legally belongs to me and should go to Natalie when she turns 18. If Victor Blackstone is using my technology, he's stolen it, and he should face consequences for that theft." The video ended with Diego giving detailed instructions about how to access additional files that contained the legal documentation proving his ownership of the disputed technology. Marcus and Natalie sat in stunned silence as the implications of what they had just seen settled over them. Diego Cruz had been murdered, or at least driven to his death through stress and fear, and Victor Blackstone had stolen technology worth hundreds of millions of dollars. "We have to take this to the police," Marcus said finally. "Will they believe us?" Natalie asked. "Blackstone has a lot of influence, and it's been 2 years since my father died. The case is closed. This evidence will reopen it," Marcus said confidently. "But Natalie, you understand what this means, don't you? Once we turn this over to law enforcement, once this becomes public, your life is going to change dramatically. You'll be the heir to a fortune worth hundreds of millions of dollars." "I don't want the money," Natalie said quietly. "I just want people to know what really happened to my father." "The money is yours by right," Marcus said. "Your father created that technology, and you're his heir. But more than that, recovering that money will be the best way to hurt Victor Blackstone. He's built his recent success on your father's work. If he has to give it back, pay damages, and face criminal charges, it will destroy him." "Good," Natalie said, and Marcus heard steel in her voice. "He destroyed my family. He deserves to lose everything." The next morning, Marcus called Patricia Valdez and arranged for her to come to the house immediately. When she arrived an hour later, Marcus and Natalie presented her with the contents of the flash drive. Patricia's reaction was immediate and dramatic. "This is evidence of conspiracy, theft, and possibly murder," she said after reviewing the materials. "Marcus, you and Natalie are sitting on one of the biggest corporate crime stories of the decade. What's our next move?" Marcus asked. "We go to the FBI," Patricia said without hesitation. "This crosses state lines, involves federal crimes, and the dollar amounts are large enough to warrant federal attention. But first, we need to make sure Natalie is protected. If Blackstone realizes what she has, he'll stop at nothing to silence her. He already knows," Marcus said, and he told Patricia about the previous night's encounter at the Henderson house. Patricia's face grew grave. "Then we need to move quickly. I'm going to call the FBI now and arrange for agents to come here today. Natalie, are you prepared to tell your story to federal investigators?" Yes, Natalie said without hesitation. "I've been waiting 2 years to tell someone who would actually listen." The FBI agents arrived that afternoon, led by Special Agent Rebecca Martinez, a woman in her 40s with kind eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor. Martinez listened intently as Natalie told her story, occasionally asking clarifying questions, but mostly allowing the girl to speak without interruption. "This is very compelling evidence," Martinez said after reviewing the flash drive contents. "But I need to ask you some difficult questions, Natalie. Are you prepared for what's going to happen when this becomes public? There will be media attention, court proceedings, and people who will question your story. Victor Blackstone has expensive lawyers, and they'll try to discredit you in any way they can." "I understand," Natalie said. "But I can't let him keep getting away with what he did to my father. And Mr. Thorne," Martinez said, turning to Marcus. "I need to understand your role in this. How did you become involved with Natalie, and what are your motivations for helping her?" Marcus told the story of finding Natalie at the bus stop, explaining his decision to help her and his growing realization of the connection between her father's death and Victor Blackstone's business practices. "You understand that your involvement complicates this case," Martinez said. "Blackstone's lawyers will argue that you've manipulated Natalie to get revenge against a business rival." "Let them argue," Marcus said. "The evidence speaks for itself. Diego Cruz documented everything, and his own words prove what happened to him." Martinez spent the rest of the afternoon taking detailed statements from both Marcus and Natalie. She also arranged for additional security for the house, explaining that federal marshals would be providing protection until Blackstone and his associates could be arrested. "How long will that take?" Marcus asked. "A few days at most," Martinez replied. "We'll move quickly on this. The evidence is strong enough for arrest warrants, and we don't want to give Blackstone time to destroy additional evidence or flee the country." That evening, as they sat around the dinner table with 2 federal marshals stationed outside, Sarah asked the question that had been on her mind all day. "Natalie, what's going to happen to you after all this is over? Will you stay here with us?" Natalie looked at Marcus, uncertainty in her eyes. "I don't know," she said honestly. "I've been on my own for so long, I'm not sure what normal life looks like anymore." "You're part of this family now," Sarah said firmly. "Dad, tell her she can stay." Marcus felt his heart swell with pride at his daughter's generosity. "Natalie will always have a home here," he said. "But she's also going to inherit a substantial amount of money from her father's work. She'll have choices that she's never had before." "Money doesn't matter," Sarah said. "Family matters. And we're family now, right, Natalie?" Natalie's eyes filled with tears. "I'd like that," she whispered. "I'd like that very much." 3 days later, Marcus woke to his phone ringing at 5 in the morning. It was Agent Martinez. "We've arrested Victor Blackstone and 4 of his associates," she said. "We hit his house, his office, and his vacation home simultaneously. He's being charged with conspiracy, theft of intellectual property, witness intimidation, and we're pursuing murder charges based on the evidence your father provided, Natalie." Marcus felt a surge of satisfaction. "What happens now?" "Now we build the case for trial. Blackstone's already trying to make bail, but given the seriousness of the charges and his resources, we're arguing that he's a flight risk. The judge will decide today." When Marcus shared the news with Natalie and Sarah at breakfast, both girls reacted with a mixture of relief and excitement. "Is it really over?" Natalie asked. "The arrests are just the beginning," Marcus said. "There will be a trial, and you'll have to testify. But yes, the hardest part is over. Victor Blackstone will never be able to hurt you again." Over the following weeks, As the legal process unfolded, Marcus watched Natalie begin to transform. The frightened, defensive child he had met at the bus stop gradually gave way to a confident, articulate young woman who was ready to fight for justice for her father. The media attention was intense, as Patricia had predicted. The story of the homeless girl who brought down a tech mogul captured the public imagination, and Natalie found herself at the center of a narrative that painted her as both victim and hero. "I don't like being famous," she told Marcus one evening as they watched a news report about the case. "Fame is temporary," Marcus replied. "Justice is permanent. What you've done will prevent Victor Blackstone from hurting other people the way he hurt your father." The trial began 6 months later, and Marcus was amazed by Natalie's composure on the witness stand. She told her story clearly and honestly, never wavering under aggressive cross-examination from Blackstone's defense team. When the jury returned with guilty verdicts on all counts, Marcus felt a sense of satisfaction that went beyond simple revenge. Justice had been served, and Diego Cruz's death had been avenged by his brave daughter. Victor Blackstone was sentenced to 25 years in prison and ordered to pay $800 million in restitution to Natalie. The technology he had stolen was returned to her, along with all the profits he had made from its use. "What will you do with all that money?" Sarah asked Natalie on the night after the sentencing. "Start a foundation," Natalie said without hesitation. "Something to help kids who are lost in the system, who don't have anyone to protect them. My father always said that technology should be used to help people, not just to make money." "That's perfect," Sarah said. "And you'll run it from here, right? You're not going anywhere?" Natalie looked at Marcus, who nodded encouragingly. "This is my home now," she said. "This is my family." 1 year after the trial ended, Marcus stood in the living room of his house, watching Natalie and Sarah work together on a presentation for Natalie's foundation. The Diego Cruz Foundation for At-Risk Youth had already helped hundreds of children find safe homes and educational opportunities. Natalie had grown several inches in the past 2 years, and her confidence had blossomed along with her physical development. She was no longer the frightened child he had found at the bus stop, but she had retained the compassion and intelligence that had made her such a compelling witness for justice. "Dad," Sarah called from the couch, "Natalie wants to know if you'll be on the board of directors for her foundation." "I'd be honored," Marcus replied, settling into his chair. "But I think you're both old enough to run it without much help from me." "We'll always need your help," Natalie said, looking up from her laptop. "You saved my life, Marcus. You gave me back my father's legacy and helped me find justice for him. More than that, you gave me a family." "You saved yourself," Marcus replied. "I just gave you a safe place to land while you figured out how to fight back." As he watched the two girls work together, Marcus reflected on how much their lives had changed since that cold November night when he had given his coat to a homeless child. He had thought he was performing a simple act of charity, but instead, he had discovered a daughter he never knew he needed and helped expose one of the most significant corporate crimes of the decade. The money from the Blackstone settlement had made Natalie one of the wealthiest teenagers in America, but more importantly, it had given her the resources to help other children who found themselves in situations similar to her own. The foundation's work had already prevented several other cases of corporate exploitation and had created a network of safe houses for children who were failed by traditional social services. "I have an idea for the foundation's next project," Natalie said, closing her laptop and turning to face Marcus and Sarah. "I want to create a scholarship program for kids who want to study computer science but don't have the resources to pay for college." "That's brilliant," Sarah said. "You could call it the Diego Cruz Scholarship Program." "My father would have loved that," Natalie said, her eyes brightening. "He always said that education was the best way to break cycles of poverty and exploitation." Marcus smiled, thinking about how proud Diego Cruz would be of his daughter. She had not only survived the trauma of losing him and living on the streets, but she had channeled that experience into a force for positive change in the world. "There's something else I want to discuss," Natalie said, her tone becoming more serious. "I've been thinking about writing a book about everything that happened. Not just the legal case, but about what it's like to be a kid living on the streets, about how the system fails children, about how people can make a difference if they just pay attention." "That's a wonderful idea," Marcus said. "Your story could help a lot of people understand issues they've never thought about before. And it could help other kids who are going through similar situations," Sarah added. "They could see that it's possible to survive and even thrive after trauma." "I want to dedicate it to my father, of course," Natalie said. "But I also want to dedicate it to you, Marcus, to the man who saw a homeless child and decided to care about what happened to her." Marcus felt tears in his eyes. "Natalie, you don't need to thank me. Having you and Sarah in my life has been the greatest blessing I could have asked for." "We're the lucky ones," Sarah said, reaching over to squeeze Natalie's hand. "We got a sister out of the deal." As the evening wore on, the three of them talked about plans for the foundation, for Natalie's book, and for their life together as a family. Marcus thought about how different his life might have been if he had simply walked past that bus stop without stopping, if he had chosen not to get involved in the complicated and dangerous situation that Natalie Cruz represented. But he had stopped, and he had gotten involved, and as a result, his life had been immeasurably enriched. He had gained a daughter, Sarah had gained a sister, and together they had helped bring a dangerous criminal to justice while building something positive from the ashes of tragedy. "I love you both," Marcus said as they finally prepared to head upstairs for the night. "We love you too, Dad," Sarah replied, using the name that Natalie had recently started calling him as well. "Thank you for saving me," Natalie said, giving him a hug. "Thank you for seeing me when I was invisible." "Thank you for letting me help," Marcus replied. "Thank you for trusting me with your story." As they turned off the lights and headed upstairs, Marcus reflected on the lesson that Natalie had taught him. Sometimes the most important thing a person can do is simply notice when someone else is in need, and then take action to help. He had been living his life focused on business success and financial achievement, but Natalie had shown him that true success came from using his resources and influence to make a positive difference in the world. The next morning, Marcus woke to find Natalie already up and working on her laptop in the kitchen, a cup of coffee growing cold beside her. "You're up early," he said, pouring himself coffee from the pot. "I couldn't sleep," she replied, not looking up from her screen. "I kept thinking about the book, about how to tell the story in a way that would really help people understand what it's like to be a kid, with no one to protect them." Marcus sat down beside her and saw that she had already written several pages. "How does it start?" "With the bus stop," Natalie said. "With the moment when a stranger decided to care about what happened to me. I think that's the most important part of the whole story, that moment when someone chooses to see you as a person worth helping." "And how does it end?" Natalie smiled, the first real smile Marcus had seen from her that morning. "With hope," she said. "With the idea that no matter how dark things get, there are always people who will fight for justice if you give them the chance." Marcus read over what she had written, struck by the maturity and insight in her words. At 15, Natalie had already experienced more trauma and triumph than most people face in a lifetime, and she was using that experience to create something that could help others. "This is going to be a powerful book," he said. "I hope so," Natalie replied. "I want other kids to know that their stories matter, that they deserve to be protected and cared for, and that there are people who will fight for them if they just hold on long enough to find them." As Marcus prepared for work that morning, he thought about the journey that had brought them all to this point. What had started as a simple act of kindness had evolved into something much more significant, a story of justice, family, and redemption that would continue to unfold for years to come. Natalie Cruz was no longer the frightened, homeless child he had met at that bus stop. She was a young woman with a mission, armed with the resources and determination to make a real difference in the world. And Marcus Thorne was no longer just a successful businessman focused on quarterly profits and market share. He was a father, a protector, and a champion for those who couldn't champion themselves. The story that had begun with a coat given to a shivering child had become something much larger, a testament to the power of compassion and the importance of fighting for what's right, even when the odds seem impossible. And as Marcus drove to work that morning, he knew that this was just the beginning of what they could accomplish together. In the end, the CEO who gave a homeless girl a blanket had discovered that she was exactly who she appeared to be, a child in need of help and protection. But in saving her, he had also discovered something about himself, that his true success would be measured not by the size of his bank account or the reach of his corporate empire, but by the lives he touched and the difference he made in the world. And that was a legacy worth building, one act of kindness at a time.